All right, I'm sure you're eager to get started. First thing you want to do is download Xcode. Just go into the App Store and download it, install it. I am using Xcode 6.4, which has Swift 1.2 installed. And really, for the stuff that we're doing, Xcode 6 and above probably will work fine. But if you're seeing some incongruities, if you see that there's some menu items missing from your version, try setting Xcode to be the same as mine. Try reinstalling, getting that version, and seeing if that doesn't help. So I'm going to assume you can do that in your own time. So let's say you have Xcode installed now. Next, you want to fire up. Go to File, New, Playground. So playgrounds are a new feature. Came to Xcode fairly recently. The whole idea is that it allows you to type in code on the left-hand side and see the system change state on the right-hand side. In other words, there's intermediate results that'll show up automatically. And it's a great way to debug a more complex system. It's also a great place to start learning how to code. So we're going to use playgrounds to begin with. First thing is just delete those guys, start off fresh. And so where do we want to start with Swift? The first topic you have to know is variables. And what are variables? Well, variables are really kind of the bread and butter of programming. They're spaces for you to store data that you can then manipulate later. Okay, really the heart and soul of programming, you'd say. Variables have several parts to them. So there's the name, there's the type, and there's the value. The name is just what you want to call this thing. It's for your own purposes so that in the code you know what's going on. The type is what types of things do I want to store in that variable. Okay, it can be anything from an integer to a floating point value to a string and a wide variety of other possibilities that we'll get into. The value is the thing you're trying to store itself. So, name, type, value. How does this work in Swift? So in Swift, we declare a variable by saying var space the variable name. So let's call our first variable x space colon, and then we type in the type. So for the type, let's just use ints for integer. We use ints at first because they're easy to work with. Then an equal sign, and then the value that we care about. So we're trying to store the value 3 inside this box that we call x. Okay? And you'll notice on the right-hand side, since we just finished this statement, it's now a valid Swift statement. You've written your first legal Swift statement. Congratulations. On the right-hand side, you see that 3 pop up. That's just showing you what's changed inside the state. So that's the feature of Playgrounds that's so exciting. So let's just try declaring a few more variables. Let's make one called y, also type int, which is 4. And then now let's throw a little twist into it. Let's make z, you've typed int, but let's make it equal to x plus y. And you can see in the right-hand side, 7 shows up automatically. And that's interesting because, we didn't really go into yet what would happen with that. But what's happening is x plus y are getting evaluated to 7 because x is 3 and y is 4. And then that value in turn is getting stored inside variable c. Okay? Some other types you can deal with. For now, we can restrict it to integers, floats, and strings. Floats are simply numbers with decimals in them, you can think. Okay, so they're not integers, they actually have fractional components to them. So 3.5, for instance. And strings allow you to have basically text. So My name, Isaac Ho. Put your name in there. So those are a couple of the most common types that you'll see, and they're very basic to work with. Now, let's do something a little more complex. Okay, so you know how to declare variables, you know how to store values inside them, but how do they relate to one another? And what are some of the ways you can manipulate variables? Well, what's interesting is, let's say you take one of the variables you've already declared, so z, for instance. Okay, so first of all, once you've declared a variable, you no longer need to refer to it with the var keyword. You can just use the name. So let's say we want to change, let's say we want to change y and make it equal to 5 now. Okay, so we've already declared this variable y. It was equal to 4 before, but now we want to set it to 5. Question is, what does this do to the value in z? And so here, on the right side, it still shows 7, right? What's interesting is, if we then use a statement called printline to print the value of y, or excuse me, print the value of z, it also shows 7. In other words, the x plus y doesn't get recomputed, right? And the reason is because you have to picture what's going on inside the state of the system, what's going on in memory. Bottom line is that there's an order of operations, and it just goes from top to bottom, right? So you declared x as equal to 3, you declared y set equals to 4, declared z and set it equal to 3 plus 4, which is then 7. At that point, it doesn't matter what you then change x and y equal to, in the sense that z will still remain 7. Okay? What are some other ways to manipulate variables? Well, what if you wanted to, say, swap two different values? So let's say you have x and y and z, but you wanted to take whatever's inside y and make it equal to x instead, and then take whatever's in x and make it equal to y instead. So we want to swap those values at that place in the code.